The first 100 years of Islam. In the first 100 years of Islam, Islam had come to Europe. Islam had come to Europe. Point number one. And indeed, Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus, the Muslims called this Al-Andalus. Any idea why? Any idea why did they call it Al-Andalus? They came to a country, why didn't they call it Hispania? Because the Romans called it Hispania. Why? Any idea? Why Al-Andalus? The whole part, the whole Iberian Peninsula. Yeah. Not from North Africa. Yeah, but why did they call it Al-Andalus? Have you ever heard of a tribe, a Germanic tribe called Vandals? Vandals. These were Germanic people, the same like the Gothic people, the same like a lot of other Germanic tribes that time ruling in Europe. They ruled before in certain parts of Europe and in North Africa. And for the mindset of the Muslims that time, they were the Germanic people who were ruling there, although it was not them anymore, it was Gothic people. But before them, the Vandals were there, so they just gave them Vandal, Al-Andalus. Okay, Al, the article in Arabic, Vandal, Andalus. Very clear. So they just gave them the name that they knew from people residing there before. So, but Tariq bin Ziyad arrives in Gibraltar in 711. Within 4 years, the whole of the peninsula had been opened, and I use properly the term, the verb to open in English, the same that we use in Arabic. I'm not saying conquered, simply because if you understand the idea, language is very important. If you say conquer, automatically your mind goes and thinks of killing, bloodshed. But not everything happened the way we imagine a conquest should be when you open a country. Not everywhere there was bloodshed. I'm not saying that there were no wars. Of course there was a war. And of course he fought Rodrigo, the ruler of the Visigoths of the peninsula. And he killed him, yes. But many villages, many towns opened themselves freely and voluntarily because, what do you think? When they saw the Muslims coming, when they saw Tariq bin Ziyad coming, when they saw the Muslim army arriving, giving them their freedoms, why do you think Jews, Christians, non-Christians, non-Jews, who were living there at that time, why do you think they accepted being rather under Muslim rule than under Visigothic Christian rule before? Why do you think that? Why do you think? What did they see? What happened? Sorry? Good behavior. Tariq bin Ziyad, his army, 4,000 people, not more, who moved on. His army showed Islamic behavior. This is something we lack nowadays, right? There was a time in Cyprus, for example, there was a time when Turks and Greeks were living together. And when the British came, they went to Ali's shop and they would tell him, look, Nikos made more money. They went to Nikos' shop and they tell him, look, Ali made more money. And they would say, no problem. No problem. My family, I made my money for my family today. Let them go somewhere else today. That's how we used to be together. Greeks and Turks, Christians and Muslims together before the colonialists came. And there was also the time when Muslims were looked upon as something very special. Don't forget that the majority of the countries nowadays that are called Muslim countries opened because of the behavior of the Muslims, of the tradespeople. When the tradespeople went to Indonesia, when the tradespeople went to Malaysia, when the tradespeople went to Africa, when they went to Asia, whatever they went to, most of the people looked at these people and saw what kind of akhlaq, what kind of behavior is that? MashaAllah, this is amazing. Why? And they would say, because I'm a Muslim. The Muslim would say, because I'm a Muslim. That's why I'm doing that. What is this Islam? Tell us. Indonesia, the biggest populated Muslim country in the world, became Muslim because of the tradespeople's behavior. Nobody went to tell these people about Islam. They saw the Muslims. They did not wait for somebody to come and give them da'wah. The Muslims were praying. The Muslims were not lying. The Muslims were honest. They were real people, real Muslims, subhanAllah. This is amazing. And this I found interesting when I came across Islam, when I was in Germany and I was studying. And I came across these stories. These are not some kind of made-up stories. These are not stories by Muslims. You will find them if you want to. You will find these stories in non-Muslim literature. And I was studying that time political science, and I was studying also linguistics, which had to do with a lot of languages, Spanish, Italian, and so on. And when I looked into Spanish history, Italian history, Portuguese history, and I saw that there were a lot of Arabic terms in their language, how they acquired these terms simply because the Muslims were there. I was fascinated. The Muslims were once in Spain. The Muslims were once in Italy. The Muslims were once in Portugal. I didn't know that. I didn't know these things. Nobody told me that. And I went through school 13 years of my life. And the German education system, believe me or not, is better than this system here. And still, we didn't hear anything about these things. How come? How come? And I tell you now, because I know the system here as well. I'm also a teacher here. I ask these children here, have you ever heard of Islam in Britain? Has anybody ever told you about Abdullah Quilliam William? Has anybody told you that Islam came to this country before your parents came here? And it was said before, right? It's true. We came in the 60s, 70s, right? But long before Islam had reached these islands, British Isles already, long before. So if we look back to Al-Andalus again, Tariq bin Ziyad arrives. Within 4 or 5 years, he has reached already, look at that, Narbonne. Narbonne. This is France, the south of France, all the way let me see if I can move, okay. All the way, this is the south of France. This is called, it's a city, Narbonne. This is France. So the Muslims came from Gibraltar without problems up to Narbonne. This whole area was once called Al-Andalus. And that includes also Portugal, the city of Lisbon, the capital city, which was established by the Muslims. Madrid, the capital city of Spain, which was established by the Muslims. Toledo, a city which became very thriving during the time of Islam and the Muslims there, up to Narbonne and up to many, many places in France, in the south of France. This was Al-Andalus. And there's not just, as people believe, Andalusia, the south of Spain just. No, it was the whole of Spain nearly. Just the north, Asturias. This was an area where the Christian from the royal family, they moved away from the south and went up to the north. And the Muslims left them in peace. They left them there. But there was a problem, because if you look further, by 750, the Christians had already reached to the west. By 800, they came to the south, and so on until 1492. The last Muslim city in Spain that fell was Granada in 1492. That means from 711 to 1492, this is a time of more than 7 centuries. 700 years. This is half of our time in Islam. Where are we now? We are now in? Which year are we now in Islam? 1440. Half of 1440, 720 years and more was in Al-Andalus. Have you ever thought about it? Have you ever sat still about this one? That half of the time that we are living in at this moment as Muslims, half of this time played in Al-Andalus. No, we have never thought of it, right? Half of the time was in Al-Andalus, subhanAllah. And look how the loss of Al-Andalus happened over centuries. Over centuries. We have in the year 800, we have already quite a big part of the north of Spain going down. Portugal was lost already in the 11th century. And Portugal, when we lost Portugal in the 11th century as Muslims, the Portuguese, they couldn't go anywhere inside to Europe because it was all Muslim still. They had to go outside. And where did they go to? They went to America and to Africa. The Portuguese. The first colony abroad was Brazil, what is nowadays Brazil. And that's why the Portuguese were pushed to become colonialists because of Islam. You know, the Portuguese found America because of the compass, which the Muslims brought to Europe. The Muslims brought the compass to Europe. Okay? And Christopher Columbus probably couldn't read it properly. And that's why he thought that he was in India when he arrived in America. Right? So, many, many things that are of importance here now. Now, Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus, as we said before, thank you, is not only the small geographical area that we saw of the Iberian Peninsula, but also another part, a certain part in France. Look at the south of France. Look at that. There is a route, this green route, that leads all the way to the north, Central Europe. Does anybody have an idea which country the Muslims went to after France? That's France. And they went all the way to the north, and they went to a country which is in Central Europe. Any idea which country this is? Italy is here. That is Italy. Belgium is a little bit further. Switzerland, mashallah. Indeed. What's your name? Who said so? Who said Switzerland? It was a boy. No, it was a young boy, wasn't it? Mashallah. Did you know that or did you guess? Okay. Switzerland. In Switzerland, believe it or not, in the 9th and 10th century, there were Muslims in the south of Switzerland that became a Muslim country. It was part of the Muslim empire in the 9th century, established with contracts between King Hugh of Arles, who was the king in Central Europe, and other kings, Christian kings. They accepted the Muslims in the south of Switzerland as having an entity for themselves. They signed contracts. These contracts still exist nowadays. And that's the very country, I just came from there last month, that's the very country which does not allow Muslims to have a minaret, or this does not allow to build more mosques, because they say Islam has nothing to do with us Swiss. Islam came from outside to us. Islam came from outside to us. In the 9th century, Switzerland was a Muslim country. In the 9th century, there were Muslim Swiss Muslims. The Swiss were taught how to do medical performances. They were not able to do these things before the Muslims were there. And the same in France. The same in the south of France. What is the export good of France? What do the French export? Wine. How do they close their wine bottles? With cork. Who taught them how to make them corks? The Muslims. The Muslims taught the French how to make cork. And with this cork, they could close their bottles and sell them and export them outside. Can you imagine how France would look? How would Europe look? This is just a small indication. Just imagine, how would Europe be different if we didn't have the Muslims in Europe? And we just discussed some issues, some small points. This is all part of Al-Andalus. Switzerland was opened in the 8th and 9th century, and that was all in the time of Al-Andalus. So Al-Andalus is a geographical area, but Al-Andalus is also a period between 711 and 1492. And within that period of time, the Muslims had reached Central Europe, up to the border of Germany. Switzerland, France, another country that you mentioned before. Look at that. Italy. Italy was such an important country that without the Muslims in Italy, there wouldn't have been a Renaissance in Europe. Anybody knows what is the Renaissance? Yes, Dad. A little bit louder again, please, the period of time. Exactly, when arts, music, what's your name? Muhammad. And do you know when it was, more or less, around? A little bit, okay, that's good. 15th, 16th century. Indeed, the Renaissance was a period of time for the Europeans to actually thrive, to become culturally aware, to know their history, to look back into ancient Greece, to look back into Rome. And how could they look back into ancient Greece and Rome? Who gave them the materials and the literature? Aristotle, Plato, Sophocles. They didn't know them by the 16th century. They had disappeared. Who discovered them for them again? The Muslims in Al-Andalus. The Muslims in Al-Andalus. They did the translation work from Greek into Arabic, but also from Greek into Latin. And many scholars that we know nowadays, scholars in Europe, scholars in Britain, Adalad from Bath. Have you ever heard from him? He translated he translated many works from Greek, from Arabic into English, because the works that time were either in Greek or in Arabic, and the Muslims had translated them into Arabic. So anybody who had to have a scholarship, anybody who knew something, who was an academic, like we come nowadays to the UK, but many of us come from other countries to study in Britain, you have to learn English. That time, if you wanted to study in Al-Andalus, you had to learn Arabic. You had to learn Arabic. The Spanish indigenous population was rather speaking Arabic than Spanish. The Portuguese population was rather speaking Arabic than Portuguese. A massive amount. Nowadays, we have in the Spanish language, in the Portuguese language, a very big amount, and I don't want to mention numbers because it is a very controversial which number, what the number is, but a very big amount of Arabic terms in Spanish and in Portuguese. You know, the torero, when the bull comes towards the torero, you know, he's standing there and he says, what does he say? What does the torero say when the bull comes? Ole, ole, ole. What does that mean? What is ole? What is ole? Imagine there's a bull coming towards you. What are you going to say? You're going to say Allah, Allah. Imagine in any language you're going to say that. Imagine there's a bull coming towards you. You're going to be Allah. And indeed, it is a dua because the non-Muslims, had heard the Muslims saying the whole time, Allah, Ya Allah. Ya. So it became a part of the Spanish language. Ole is Allah. It's a dua. The Spanish, when they speak to each other, they say, nos vemos mañana, ojalá. We'll see each other tomorrow, ojalá. Inshallah. Ojalá is part of the Spanish language. They say ojalá. The Portuguese say oxalá. There is so many things. In Sicily, in the south of Italy, there is an island, Sicily, that was an emirate. What is an emirate? Any idea? What is an emirate? What was an emirate? Not what it is nowadays. No. What was an emirate? And what is, forget the Ottomans, we're not there yet. We're still at Al-Andalus. Emir is what? What is an emir? Can we, an equivalent in the Christian world, maybe the prince or something? We could say maybe something like the prince. You're right, mashallah. So there was a principality, or it was a part that belonged to the Muslim emir. The Emirate of Sicily, which is an island of Italy nowadays, was for around 250 years part of the Muslim world. And there, on this island, the Muslims were as free to act as they were in Spain. And they did act. They did translate work. They did show a lot of work that the Europeans later would not have had the Muslims not been there. A very, very important period of time. That's the Mediterranean Sea. And somebody mentioned before another part of Europe. We spoke about Spain, we spoke about Portugal, we spoke about France and Switzerland, Italy, and there is one island we did not mention. Somebody mentioned it before. That was part of the British Empire. Malta. Malta. What do people speak in Malta? What is the language? What are the official languages in Malta? 2 official languages. What do they speak in Malta? Official language is Italian, Mohammed, and English. Very good. What is the language they speak to their grannies? Mohammed. What is Maltese, Mohammed? Say it again. Say it loud. Say it loud. Not only a bit. It's up to 70% an Arabic dialect. As much an Arabic dialect as Moroccan, Tunisian, Algerian is. Subhanallah. Mohammed, come here to me. Come on. This was my first book I wrote 3 years ago. Okay? It's about the Ottoman legacy of mainland Greece. This is for you. You got it already? Oh my God, what do you do? Okay, is there something you don't have? We'll speak about it later. MashaAllah. Okay, now this is a prize for somebody else, MashaAllah. Okay. Jazakallah Muhammad. Absolutely great. So yes, indeed, Maltese. The Maltese language is nothing else but 70%. Some linguists say 50, 60, 70. The point is that more than half of the language is Arabic vocabulary, Arabic grammar, Arabic syntax, Arabic structure. Subhanallah. So that means North African people could go to Malta, speak their language, and they would be understanding each other. Subhanallah. Okay? So they didn't leave something specific behind in Malta, but one thing, the language, which is very important. I remember I had this colleague of mine, she was working with me at that time, and she was from Malta. And I asked her, I was teasing her. I said, listen, what do you say? I say good morning in Maltese. She says, buongiorno. I said, no, that's Italian. I said, no. I said, not buongiorno. Tell me in your language. I said, Maltese. What do you say when you say good morning in Maltese? She said, good morning. I said, no. I said, come on now. How do you greet your granny? She said, sabah al khair. Sabah al khair. I said, what are you saying there? I said, say it again. I said, say it loud. She knew what I was. Sabah al khair. I said, that's Arabic. She said, no. No, we have our own language. There is similarity, she said, because the Arabs were there. I said, no, you're wrong. The Arabs were not there. The Muslims were there. The Muslims were there. And the Muslim main language is Arabic. Because as we said before, the Berber Tariq bin Ziyad was not an Arab, he was a Berber. But the main language, and the language that we all pray in, mashallah, the adhan, our salah, everything, it doesn't matter if you're Greek, Italian, Turkish, whatever, we all pray and we all believe in Allah. Allah is an Arabic term, and we all speak Arabic, of course. So the main language of the Muslims was Arabic, of course. So that's why this language has become actually the language of a European people, the Maltese. 70%. Imagine that. I told her, count for me in Maltese, 1 to 10. Count for me in Maltese, 1 to 10. واحد اثنين ثلاثة أربعة خمسة ستة. I said, you're counting in Arabic. He said, no, that's Maltese. Yeah, I said, you see? Do you see that? Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Europe and Islam. Look at the closeness. Look at that. Al-Andalus is a massive area, which we're going to, inshallah, discuss when we have the workshop. But this is just an introduction. I just want you to be aware of certain things. There's so much more we can talk about. So much more. There's the island of Cyprus. There's the island of Crete. All these were once part of Al-Andalus as well. But this is something we discuss another time, inshallah. Okay? There's another second people who came from, this time not from Africa, but from Asia. Who are these people who brought Islam to another part of Europe? Not to the southwest, like Spain and the Iberian Peninsula, but this time to the Balkans. Who are these people? They came long after Al-Andalus. Not long, they came after Al-Andalus in the 15th century. Who was that? The Ottomans, mashallah, the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans. Who are these people? Now, please don't come and tell me Turks. Please don't. There were no Turks. That time there was no Turkey, there was no Turks, there was nothing like that. This is a new invention of the 1923 of the 20th century. Turkey exists as a country since 1923. That was the time when Mustafa Kemal Atatürk decided, to set up a country in the name of nationalism, okay, and call it Turkey. Before, there was no Turks, no Sultan, no Caliph, no Emir. Nobody would call themselves Turk. In the contrary, they would actually behead you if you called them Turk. So they were not Turkish people. They were Turkic people, yes. What is the difference? They came from Central Asia. And they had Turkic background, meaning they spoke a Turkic language. Look where they came from. That's where the original people of nowadays from Turkey, that's where they come from Central Asia, a massive area. We're talking about Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, China, Mongolia, massive area. These are massive different tribes. They all came together. And the one who brought them together, what was his name? Osman Ghazi. Ottoman Empire is called Ottoman Empire because Osman was the one who was the leader, the founder of the Ottoman Empire. And why did he bring these people together? Why did they flee Central Asia? What happened? Any idea? Why did they came towards Europe? What happened? Why didn't they stay in Asia? They didn't like it in Asia? What happened? Yes, the Mongols, they chased them away. They were fighting. The Mongols were always busy since the 13th century already, starting being busy with the Seljuks, being busy with the Ottomans, being busy with a lot of people and chasing a lot of people away. The Tatars as well. And I want to make a point here. In Arabic, The Arabs call Mongols Tatars. That's a wrong terminology. Tatar people were different people. They came from the Mongols, because the Turkic people also came from the Mongols, but there's a connection. But they were different people. And it's important for us to know, because the Tatars came later to Europe. Okay, but we're going to talk about this one quickly, inshallah. So now, the Ottomans, they came from Central Asia. And they brought Islam to the Balkan Peninsula. Look, that's the Balkan Peninsula. That is where I come from. Look, this is Greece. This is Albania. This was what was Yugoslavia before. Up to Vienna. Vienna is where? Yes, ma'am. Austria, up to Austria. Okay, look, you know why Muhammad can answer all these questions? Because he just bought all my books, mashallah. Okay, so in case you're interested, my books are there, please, inshallah, okay? So that you can also answer the questions next time, inshallah. Now, so up to Vienna, the gates of Vienna, mashallah. Austria, Vienna. And I've been in Vienna. I've made a very nice documentary, mashallah, some years back. And I was in the center of Vienna. And in Vienna, in the center of Vienna, there are more than 200 monuments reminding the Viennese population every day of the Ottoman threat, of the Turkish threat, as they call it. And that's why I say, no, it's wrong to call this Turkish threat Turkish. They were not Turks. They were Ottomans. Because together with the Ottomans and with the Ottoman Empire, it was also other people who were fighting with them, other Muslims as well. And the Ottoman was a dynasty. It was not a Turkish, it was not an ethnic people. It was a dynasty. They were all together. Okay, so it was not a specific people. It was not just the Turks. It was not just Turkish people, but it was different types of people who were together under the Ottoman Empire. And there were also Arabs who were part of the Ottoman Empire. There were Greeks who were part of the Ottoman Empire. There were Armenians who were part of the Ottoman Empire. So all these people were once part of the Ottoman Empire, and they were fighting for the Ottoman Sultan. So they had reached up to Vienna, up to Austria, mashallah. Look at that. Look at that. And this is the time, the 17th century, where the Ottomans has reached in the south up to Eritrea, Ethiopia. Look at that. Africa. In the west, up to Morocco, the border of Morocco, Algeria. In the north, up to Vienna. And in the east, they had gone up to Iraq. Imagine that. This is a massive empire. One of the biggest empires in the world. One of the biggest empires in world history. Under Suleiman the Magnificent. Who was the Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent? Anybody, any idea? Why was he called the Magnificent? Who called him Magnificent? Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Who called him that? Who gave him this title? The Europeans. What was his name in the Muslim world? Suleiman. What was he called under the Arabs and the Ottomans? Who called them? What did they call him? Kanuni. Have you ever heard of this? Suleiman Kanuni. That means the lawgiver, the lawmaker. He was somebody who was responsible for the issues of law. He was actually himself a jurist in many ways. But nobody in the Muslim world called him magnificent. This is a great title. It was the Europeans who called him magnificent. Imagine that. They called their enemies magnificent. Do you understand the point here? Do you see the point? That European non-Muslims would call a Muslim sultan magnificent, a greater name than he was given by his own subjects, his own people. Imagine that. There was once a time in the 16th, 17th century when Europe was trembling and fearing the Ottomans. That time they were saying, oh, the Turks, when they come, oh my God. So they invented a lot of things. They called the Turks monsters. They gave them some kind of 2 or 3 heads. You know, they would eat children and babies, they would say, these things, to make them look, to dehumanize them. Okay? So they gave them these kind of attributes. Terrible people, terrible monsters. We're all scared of the Turks. But actually, they were just normal people who were keeping the flag of Islam up until a certain period of time. In the 17th century, that was the time that Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent had reached Vienna, but they could never gain the whole of the city up to the north of Austria. They couldn't make it up to there because the people who supported the Christians, and the Christians is a very important point we learn from history, the Christians came together and they fought the Muslims. And when the Christians came together, they became strong. When the Muslims came together, they became strong. When the Muslims disunited, went apart from each other, they totally gave it to the Christians. And that's what happened in Al-Andalus later in Spain and in Portugal. When the Muslims fought each other, they were fighting each other together with the Christians even. And this is a very sad situation in our Muslim history. The Balkan Peninsula, this is nowadays part of Europe. We even see countries that are part of the European Union, such as Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary. Look at Hungary in the north. Hungary, that was once part of the Ottoman Empire as well. 250 years, the Ottomans were there. The Hungarian culture, one of the most important things in Hungary that people live on and they consider their culture is the spa culture, hot baths. That, of course, comes from the Ottomans. That, of course, the baths, if you go to Budapest and you see the old baths that are still there, they're all from Ottoman time. They're all from Ottoman time. This is in Hungary. If you look at other places in Romania, even there are Muslims in Romania, also from the time of the Ottomans. In Bulgaria, you have a lot of Muslims, but they're heavily persecuted. Heavily persecuted. In places like Kosovo, Macedonia, North Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the south of Serbia, the majority are Muslims. These are Muslim countries. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, North Macedonia, these are actually Muslim countries. Turkey, we have Muslim countries in Europe. Muslim countries in Europe. So Islam has no role in Europe. That's not true. There is a myth. There is a myth that they're trying to tell us that a European cannot be Muslim. That is not true. And I remember a friend of mine in America, an African American, they were running a center in New York where they received some Bosnian refugees at that time when the war was in the 1990s. They received some Bosnian refugees and they put them in accommodation and they had them in their mosques. And they were surprised to see white Muslims. White Muslims. It's like, what? We didn't know that they were white Muslims. Imagine that. Imagine that. People are really very ignorant in general. And we as Muslims, we have really not a lot of idea what's happening around us. So yes, Bosnian Muslims, Serbian Muslims, North Macedonian, Kosovarian, Albanian Muslims. We should not forget it. Albania is 70% Muslim. Okay? So, the Balkan Peninsula. And this is what it looked like what we're discussing. Al-Andalus, Spain and Portugal, Sicily, the island of Sicily, which was an emirate, and the Ottomans from the east and from the east, southeast actually, of the Balkan Peninsula, up to Vienna, where the Muslims, the Ottomans, went. Later, they also opened Cyprus for Islam. Any questions up to there? Anything you want to ask? Yes, please, feel free. The Suleiman the Magnificent, yes. Yes, what about him? Suleiman was an Ottoman Sultan, okay, whose mother was actually, okay, it's not important, but he has background which is European. He has a European background, clear European background. There was no Asian background, but it was a European background. Because most of their mothers were either Russian, Bosnian, Albanian, or Greek. And Sultan Mehmed Fatih, for example, who opened Athens and Greece, Sultan Mehmed Fatih, his mother was Greek, and he spoke Greek. Okay, but we don't speak about it. In Greece especially, people don't talk about this. Okay, people don't talk about it. Let's not talk about this one. So, Al-Andalus and the Ottomans. So these are the two big roots, but there's a third one. Two big peoples came to Europe and they brought Islam to Europe. But there's a third people, they came to East Europe, to Eastern Europe, and to the north. They came to this part of Europe and to the north, to Finland. Who do you think is this? They came later, in the 14th, 15th century. Who was that? What do you think? Any idea? Now, whoever can tell me that, they get this book. Good, mashallah. Come, this is yours. Or do you have it too? Good, the Tatars. Who are the Tatar people? Tell us. Sorry, say that again? Yes. Mm-hmm. Very very good. Okay. The Tatar people came indeed from Central Asia, the same like Central Asians that we're discussing before, the Ottomans. They came from the same area, and they actually fought the Mongols. They fought the Mongols, and that's why they had to flee, because the Mongols were very upset with them. So they chased them out of Asia into two countries nowadays. That was one country before. Have you ever heard of the Polish-Lithuanian Empire? The Polish-Lithuanian Empire. Poland and Lithuania were once one empire. Poland and Lithuania, one empire. And together, they accepted the Tatars to go to them and to fight for them, because they obviously needed people to fight the enemies, because it was a big empire. And the Tatars, being big people, muscled people, you know, riding horses like me, you know. Why are you laughing? So there were big people. They came, they told them, come to us, we accept you, but we want you to fight for us. You stay with us. You get villages in the south of Poland, in the northeast of Lithuania. You will find still nowadays Muslim villages. And these Muslim villages, from that time, they were given to the Muslims, and they told them, you stay here, you educate your children in Quran, you have your own villages, you have your own madrasas, you have your own schools, you have your own mosques, whatever you want to. And on top of this one, they gave them even a special status. They gave them lordship. They became lords, sir. Imagine that. Because why? They needed them. Because they needed these people to come and fight for them. So now, a special, very, very, very special time of the 16th century, 15th, 16th century actually, when the Tatars came over from Central Asia, and they were allowed to stay in Europe, in that part of the world. Later, they were even allowed to travel as tradespeople to go to Finland. Later, the Tatar people went to Finland, and nowadays in Finland, there's 1% of the Finnish population who are Tatar people. And the cuisine, the food in Finland is heavily influenced by Tatar cuisine. So they were not a big number, but they influenced Finland, they influenced Poland, they influenced Lithuania. And they fought for Poland and Lithuania for their independence. World War I, World War II, they fought for them. Subhanallah. And many Polish people until nowadays, they say, yes, we have to admit that Tatar people fought for our independence in Poland. Muslim Tatar people fought for their independence, subhanallah. And many Polish people are quiet when people talk about Islam. There might be a lot of racism going around, but with regards to Tatars, they're quiet. They're quiet because they know that without the Tatars, there would have been no Poland. There was a time there was no Poland. So if you look at Russia, as we said, there is a province which is called Tatarstan. The Tatar people have an own province, but not an own country. Not anymore. They used to have an empire, but not anymore. And this province in Russia is called Tatarstan. And there are a big majority of Muslim people, of Tatar people living still in the Republic of Tatarstan in Russia. The Mongol Empire, another massive empire again. Look at that. And interestingly enough, the Mongols, although they were non-Muslims, and they destroyed actually Baghdad in the 13th century. They destroyed Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasids. They destroyed actually Islam for a while, the Muslims. But they never destroyed Islam. They destroyed the Muslims, but they never destroyed Islam. Because what happened, the Mongol people accepted Islam after they had defeated the Muslims. It's an incredible situation. Never this happened in the world, that a victor over a people accepts their culture and their religion and their being. So Mongol people accepted Islam although they had defeated the Muslims. This is clearly Allah's hand. This is clearly something that it cannot be something else. Right? They did not have to do that. They accepted Islam. And through the Mongol people, we got the Mughal Empire in India. Through the Mongol people, Islam spread towards Asia and Russia, the Golden Horn, right? So we see that example here. You see the Tatars here. These are Tatars from the 1920s. It gives you an idea what they look like, right? A photo of that time. You see a mosque in Lithuania, a masjid, okay, in Lithuania, and these two are in Poland. They still exist nowadays. But if you want to go there, for example, if you want to pray there, you have to go and find the imam. You have to go and find somebody to open the mosque. The mosques are closed, unfortunately. They're not really, that's something important we have to realize. Again, out of history, we don't just learn some dates and battles, but what we realize from history is what we said before. When we are united and when we are together, we are strong. And when we are fighting each other, the others are strong. Next to this one, the Tatars, they had it too easy. And I've realized, honestly, I tell you that one thing. I moved to this country 18 years ago from Germany. And in Germany, that time and nowadays, it's not easy being a Muslim. It's not like in France, but it's not easy. It's like in between France and England. And we didn't have, it's not easy in Germany. If you go to university, you think, yeah, mashallah, it's easy. You go to university, there's a prayer room, there's an Islamic society. So what are you talking about? When I saw Islamic society the first time when I came to London, I was like, what is that? A prayer room in a university? So what is that? Crazy. They did not allow in Germany to have a prayer room in the university. They would not allow Muslims praying in a university. What are you talking about? No. But I saw this in this country 18 years ago, and I was surprised. I was very surprised. And the freedom that we have in this country, we have to admit, the freedom we have in this country, there's no other country in Europe that gives you this freedom. And we have to see that when it's made difficult for a Muslim, I tell you that, I went back to Germany just a month ago. And I must say, 5-6 million Muslims in Germany. It's a massive amount. They are very weak, but you know what? I felt more warmth amongst the Muslims in Germany than here. I have the feeling that when it's too easy for a Muslim, no problem, we have prayer places here. We can pray whenever we want to. We have, at schools, at high schools, we have prayer. Everything is easy for the Muslims in this country. Alhamdulillah, it's good, fine, no problem. Our women, hijab, niqab, no problem. But on the continent, it is difficult. That brings Muslims closer together. Now, I'm not saying, alhamdulillah, I'm happy. That's why I moved over to this country. We are living here. Alhamdulillah, we've decided to move to this country simply because it is easier to practice your religion. But for many Muslims, that does seem to be a problem. If it's too easy, then we become too complacent, too assimilated. That is the word. And what happened to the Tatars that time, it's exactly that. We have to learn from our history one important point. The Tatars have assimilated so much into Lithuanian, Polish, and Finnish society that today we don't even know who is a Tatar, who is a Muslim in Finland, who is a Muslim in Lithuania and Poland. We don't know that. They themselves have forgotten about it. The same what happened in Yugoslavia. But look what happened in Yugoslavia. In Yugoslavia, people had forgotten they were Muslims. But look, they came after them. They came after them. Even if you were, drinking and your wife was Catholic and, your children did not practice, still they went after you. They came after them. So assimilation is something we have to be very careful about. And I think that's what we learn in this part of our history in Europe, that if you assimilate in a non-Muslim society, okay, that does not keep you safe, first. And second, you lose everything. You lose your deen. That's everything. That's everything. But what we need to do is integrate. Integration is the magical word here. The magical term that we have to understand is integration. And what do we mean? What do I mean with that? What is the difference between integration and assimilation? Why do I mention these things? What do I mean with it? What is integration? What is assimilation? What is the difference? Any idea? A very important point, number one, when you are integrated, you keep your Muslim identity. You are still a Muslim who prays 5 times a day. You're still a Muslim who maybe even speak another language, but you know English. You participate in the wider society. You are part of the society. You don't isolate yourself. That's a very important point. To isolate yourself, to go away from society, mainstream society, that is actually even haram in Islam. You're getting away from the mainstream society. So now, integration, keeping your identity, keeping who you are, being a Muslim, being allowed to be a Muslim, that is what we want in this country. That's what we want in Europe. But assimilating, as it happened that time under the Tatars in Finland, in Lithuania and in Poland. Nowadays, we don't know. The Tatars themselves don't know who is a Tatar. The Tatars themselves don't know who is Muslim. And this is dangerous. And this is what we have to tell our children. We have to be made clear. There is no us and them narrative. Okay, there is no us and them narrative, but there is a narrative of, I am a Muslim, I do pray 5 times a day. I do realize that I'm living in a society which is not Islamic, but I do participate in this non-Islamic environment as much as I can as a Muslim. We should not go to pubs, but we should be able to participate in the society as well. We have to, because otherwise rules are made over our heads. So this is a very important lesson we learn, a lesson of assimilation, integration, especially what the Tatars went through. The Tatars have lost their identity totally. The villages, as I said, when you go to their village, you have to look for somebody who has the key. They don't even open the mosques anymore. Even when it's time for Salah. Even when it's time for Salah, they don't open the mosque. Easy going. So the idea of the Tatars, the idea of the Ottomans, the idea of Al-Andalus, these are 3 important roots. These are 3 important peoples, Muslim peoples who came over to Europe and left Islam with us. One last thing, which is part of as well this book that I wanted to introduce today as well, The Islamic History of Europe, which is being taught from next month on, inshallah, at, do you know the school Pioneers Academy? Whoever knows that. In Pioneers Academy, they have accepted to teach this as a textbook. Okay, this is going to be a textbook from next month on, inshallah, in Pioneers Academy. And I'm proud to announce this one because I really think that this is what led me to Islam. 26 years of research. 26 years of research that I would like to give through to anyone else. And it is made in a very simple and easy way. Okay, anybody can profit, anybody can benefit from this book. And of course, especially for the children. But it's not only the children. We should not just think, just my children need to know that. You need to know that too. We need to know that too. It doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, 50, 60. It's something that anybody needs to know. Because it is a book also that can be used for homeschool parents, for example. In East London, I have a big group of homeschoolers who use this book for their children. So, mashallah, I really think that it is quite important, inshallah. If you want to also support my project and myself and my work, then please take a look at the book, inshallah. It's there at the moment. And you can purchase it today as well. As together with, if you want, these books, which are my first ones that came out about the Ottoman Empire. Now, but important here, there is one chapter which you have never heard of, most probably. There is a chapter about the Vikings. Have you ever heard that there was once a time that there were Vikings who accepted Islam? Yes. There was once a time when Ibn Fadlan, who was a diplomat sent from the Abbasid Caliph from Baghdad, he was sent to go to Sweden, to Scandinavia, and make a diary, make a sociological comment on the people that he saw. He stayed nearly a year with the Vikings. And amongst the Vikings where he was living, he realized that there were, not because of him, but there was a number of Vikings who had accepted Islam. And Ibn Fadlan says that, where is it? Ibn Fadlan said, found between these people, the Viking people, 5,000 men and women, all of whom had converted to Islam. They were called in Arabic al-Baringa, which came from the Old Norse word Furinga, which means the Vikings. Ibn Fadlan built a wooden mosque for them to perform their prayers and taught them how to pray. SubhanAllah. Also, we have reports from that time that Muslim Vikings who loved Islam, and they were performing their prayers, and they loved Islam, but some of them loved also their beer. So they would still drink beer. Okay? They would still drink alcohol. Some of them had bad habits, but they were Muslims. 5,000 people during the time of Ibn Fadlan. That's the 10th century. 10th century. Imagine that. Viking Muslims. So we had once a mosque in the 10th century in Sweden. In Sweden. The same like in Switzerland. You remember we spoke about Switzerland having once the south of Switzerland being a Muslim country. SubhanAllah. Imagine these things. Nobody told you, tells us these things. Nobody. We never learned these things at school. right? We never learn these things at school. So if we look at the Vikings, Ibn Fadlan was actually one of the first sociologists in the world. He was one of the first who was sent out to go to Scandinavia as a diplomat and write down, make notes about the people he would see. Sociological experience. This is something we learn nowadays in sociology. This is something that became part of university. And you know, universities. Have you seen people who has been to university here, mashallah? At the end, when you get your degree, what do you do when you get your degree in this country? Anybody who's been to university? What do you do? What is graduation ceremony? Yeah. What do you wear there? What do you wear? You wear a hat and you wear a... This is the Islamic attire. This is the turban and this is the Islamic thobe. Subhanallah. Especially in this country, in the Anglo-Saxon world, not so much in Germany, but here, the ceremonies are exactly as they used to be in the time of the Muslims in Al-Andalus, for example, when they would wear this attire and they would wear the turban. This represents the turban. The whole structure of a university, of a lecture theater, is exactly the same way as the Muslims had it before. The first university in the world was established where? In Oxford, in Cambridge? No, where? In Morocco, in Fes, by a woman in the 9th century. The first university in Europe was in Italy, in Bologna, in the 11th century. 300 years later. 300 years later, not Oxford, not Cambridge. They came 100 years later after that. So the first university was Bologna, was in Italy. And after Bologna, there was Oxford and Cambridge. And the first university in the world was established in Fes, in Morocco. The first university in Europe, in Al-Andalus. In Al-Andalus, in Cordoba. Cordoba, that was the capital of the Muslims in Spain. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Again, why don't we hear these things? Why aren't we supposed to know these things? Why do we have to find out after 26 years of being a Muslim? When I was learning these things, I was going to university at the time. I was in Germany at the university, and I was learning about Spanish linguistics, for example, and Spanish culture, and Spanish history. And I learned all these strange words, Arabic terms in Spanish, Arabic terms in Portuguese, Arab history that comes back to the Muslims, history that has to do a lot with Islam. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Why don't we know these things? Why don't we know them? But it's about time to finally come up with them. It's about time to now finally being able to teach them, and not only here, because the book came out in German first, and I have a center in Zurich, in Switzerland, where we started teaching this already 2 months ago, mashallah. So I think it's about time finally that our youth and ourselves, we need to know these things and we need to come out with them, because nowadays, when we are attacked by non-Muslims, it's not the Quran, the Bible they're interested in. They attack us with these things. They tell you, look what the Muslims did in the Middle East. Look what they do. Look what they did. Look what they do. Look in the history. Yeah, look into the history. Look into the history. What have the Muslims done for Europe? Without Muslims, there would have been no Renaissance. Without the Muslims, there would have been no algorithm. I'm having a computer. We all have a laptop at home. Without algorithm, there would be no computer. Without computer, we would not have our civilization the way we have it nowadays. Without the Muslims, there would have been no computer. Without the Muslims, there would have been no camera. Without the Muslims, there would have been no glasses. Eyeglasses, invented in Al-Andalus. Opticians from Al-Andalus. Now, the Muslims haven't done anything for us in Europe. The Muslims are some kind of barbarians. No? And the term barbarian, by the way, we mentioned it before, but we didn't clarify it. The term barbarian comes from the ancient Greek term, okay? The Greeks used to call everybody who was not a Greek a barbarian. You know why? Because when they spoke, blah, 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 I would not understand them. They couldn't understand them. They didn't speak Greek. And Greek was the high language, like English is nowadays in the world. That was Greek that time. So if they didn't speak Greek, you know, I don't understand them. They're barbarians. And this mindset of the Greeks that time, of the root of European civilization, This mindset is still there nowadays. In Europe, they believe that if you don't speak a European language, you don't speak English, French, German, then you're a barbarian anyway. This mindset is still here. It is still here in the back of the mind of the Europeans. It's still there, guys. It's still there. I'm not saying that Europeans run through the street and they say, oh, we are better, we are better. They don't say that, but they believe that. It is there. It is there. This comes from a long time back, going back to ancient Greece. Going back to ancient Greece. And this is still there. And this is a very important point. A very important point. And that's why we have to know how to deal with non-Muslims. We have to know. Again, there is no us and them narrative. But there is a very important point. We have to know that there is a difference. There is a difference in a good way. We don't go to the pub, but we do participate. We do participate in society. We speak English, alhamdulillah. We speak German, we speak French. Whatever we are, we have to speak the language. We have to be able to participate. We have to be able to utter our opinions. Very important. Our children go to their schools. Muslim children go to non-Muslim schools. Absolutely common, isn't it? Right? So there is a very important point, and we learn this from history. Please, no assimilation, integration, and what does it mean? Now, I would like to, the last 15 to 20 minutes, maybe, question and answer session, just see, I was told it's maybe the best to do that, although we did speak in between, we did participate in between, but still, I would like to say if there's any question, anything that you want to ask, anything you want to mention, please, Bill. Oh, yeah.
What would your response be? Well, I'm just going to count.
Good. Okay, stop living in the past. Now, if we have to live in the, we have to stop living in the past, they would have to stop too. So it's not that easy to say because the past is yesterday as well. Yesterday is also the past. It's part of history. Just some minutes ago is part of history as well. Now, if it was that easy to just say stop living in the past, then why do we learn about World War I and World War II? Everybody who's doing history at school, everybody who goes to British school learns about World War I, World War II, learns about the British Empire. Why is that important then? The same things you can say then. So it's not that easy. History is part of a curriculum. History is part of your life. If you don't know your history, you go nowhere. And many people have said this. Churchill spoke about the victors are the ones who write history, right? That's what Churchill said. The victors write history. He knew what he was talking about, right? So, living in the past, absolute nonsense. You know, absolute nonsense. We're not living in the past. We're just trying to come up with certain things that we have never been told, and we've never been told. We've never mentioned. Why aren't they mentioned then? Why do we mention Napoleon Bonaparte, and why do we mention World War I and World War II and the British Empire, but we don't mention the Muslims being for 250 years in Sicily, for 700 years in Spain, 500 years in Portugal, more than 500 years on the Balkan Peninsula? This is not 5, this is 500. This is not 7, it's 700. So it's not about living in the past, but it's about coming out with the past. So that's how I would react on this one. By the way, the important thing is when you come up and you speak to non-Muslims who come with such an argument, it's very important to to show them non-Islamic literature, which I mainly use for this book, English, French, German, Greek literature, which is non-Islamic, written by non-Muslims, to show them these are your own sources. The same when you talk about the Crusaders. The Crusader sources are terrible enough when they are written by themselves. They are bad enough when you read their own sources, what they write about themselves, because they were proud of it. They were proud that they were writing through blood. They were proud that when they conquered Jerusalem, they would kill anyone, indiscriminate, children, women, whatever. They are proud of this. This is in their sources. So use these sources. Don't use Muslim sources. They're bad enough. Right? Jazakallah khair. Good question. Yes. Before I forgot it, I think Yasser has given, are you giving it or you're going to, a form around. Whoever wants to give us an email address, inshallah, to keep in touch as well. Soon we're going to start an online platform with the possibility to get certified courses like this. So we can do a course about Islamic history in Europe, going into details, Islamic history in Africa, in Asia, and so on and so on. We want to offer this, inshallah, very soon. So whoever is interested, can get their email addresses through to us. Inshallah, we stay in touch. Inshallah, that would be great. Okay, yes, brother, but there was something. Yeah, yep. I can sign them. I can sign them also for you today. Jazakallah khair. Yes, ma'am. The Alps. Yeah. Well, Switzerland is, if you, okay, that's Switzerland. And Tours and Poitiers are actually above Switzerland. So indeed, there were two big battles, or one big one actually, with the French are so proud of, which is in Tours and Poitiers, in between Tours and Poitiers. That's Tours, and Poitiers is somewhere here. So in between here, that was the last battle that happened, where the French are so proud of saying that we beat the Muslims. Basically, there was a skirmish. There was not a battle. There was a skirmish of a group of Muslims who most probably got lost there. Okay? So now it's pushed up, 732. Oh, this is the big time when we killed the Muslims or got them back. Now, Switzerland is exactly here. So they came from Italy, from the north of Italy, as well as from the south of France. They went up to Switzerland. So the south of Switzerland, which is nowadays the area where they speak French and Italian, and I can show you that actually. There we go. Switzerland, the south of Switzerland, Lausanne, Geneva, Verbier, this is all area where it speaks French. Here they speak Italian, okay, up to St. Moritz. This is basically all French and Italian speaking. This was part of the Muslim Empire. And they would deal with the German speakers in the north. They would deal with the German speakers in the north, and they were allowed to, up to St. Gall, they were allowed to actually trade, to do trade with the German speakers further in the north. Okay, so they had signed an agreement, and the agreements are there, the contracts are there. They had signed the agreements and contracts for them to be able to move freely within the country, which is nowadays Switzerland, but at that time there was no Switzerland. But I mean, they were free to move within these areas and to deal also and to trade with German speakers. Yeah, clear? Yes. Oh yeah, good, yeah. Clear, good. For these kind of questions, we have enough people who know Islam better than I do to give some specific fiqh questions. But it is a good question indeed. To what extent do we integrate? Now, I'm not going to say up to there and up to there, that's the border. But indeed, as long as it does not contradict our Islam, our deen, as long as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that's the one we're following, right? You're following in the footsteps of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as long as he didn't do that, we don't do that. And as long as his ancestors, you know, the Khilafah Rashidin, we have enough examples, as long as they haven't done it. And I don't know of anyone who has celebrated Christmas. I don't know, prove me wrong. Does anybody know of someone in the past who celebrated Christmas? As far as I know, I don't know anyone in the past of the Muslims. So that is the answer to that. I mean, celebrating the feasts that are specifically for the Christians, I would say no, that's not integration. That goes close to assimilation, rather. Having a Christmas tree in your home and praying in front of it, as I've seen in a documentary, by the way, praying in front of it, that is not assimilation, that's not integration. So that goes close to assimilation. So do not celebrate their feast, do not celebrate their celebrations, and just try to, what I mean with integration is language is very important, knowing your surrounding, being involved in your environment, that is very important. Again, as I said, these are questions for really for people who know a bit more about the fiqh of the issue. But again, this is maybe something to, I don't know if, I think it's something that needs to be discussed with the Imam of the Masjid or with people who know more about the fiqh of the issue. This is really something that, and it's a lot of how you feel, what can I say on this one? It can be a dilemma. It can be a dilemma, but I think this is something that needs to be discussed with the scholars here, with the Imam of the Masjid, for example. Very good. Okay. What happened to them? So many people, Muslim country. What happened to the Muslims in Spain? What happened in 1492? Massacre. Europe is known for that. Europe is known for the way they were dealing with the minorities. And this is not something that I say, but you can find it in history, that as long as European history is a very bloody history, with regards to their minorities, especially the Jews, but then also the Muslims, always there were problems. Always. In this country, do you know that in the 13th century, the Jews had to leave this country? They had to leave, and they were just allowed to come back 200 years later. Jews were banned from this country in the 13th century until around the 15th century. And they could just come back later. This is the history of Europe as well towards them with regards to their minorities. So what happened to the Muslims in Switzerland? They were massacred. And they had to leave or assimilate. The same happened in France, the same happened in Spain, the same happened in Italy, the same happened in Portugal. Yes. Before sorry, I go with the question. This is a question. In Al-Andalus, Jews, Muslims, Christians were living together. Jews, there was a Jewish golden period in Al-Andalus. There were two golden periods, actually. There was a golden period for the Jews under the Ottomans. There was a golden period under Al-Andalus. And as soon as the Jews, as soon as the Catholics took over Spain and Portugal, the first thing they did, they got rid of the Jews first. They told the Jews they cannot stay here anymore. They had to leave. Where did the Jews go to? To the Muslim countries. They went to the Ottoman Empire on the other side or to North Africa. The Ottoman Sultan Bayezid accepted them to his country, to Constantinople, to Istanbul. So again, when the Jews had to leave a Christian country, they went and found security in the Muslim world. So if somebody comes and tells you that's the argument of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism is not part of the Muslim world, has never been part of the Muslim world. It has never been part of the Muslim world. So we have to be careful with these arguments. No, never was there a time that Muslims fought Jews because they were Jews. Never. Whereas in the Christian world, in Europe, it was absolutely normal to fear for their lives as Jews. Anywhere in Europe. Anywhere, from the north to the south. That is European history as well. Yes. No, go on, please. Subhanallah. 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 Absolutely. Subhanallah. Yeah, you hear a lot of these stories from Palestine. MashaAllah. A lot. Jazakallah khair, brother, for the input. Very important input. Because even now, I read a story on YouTube recently, on Facebook recently, just some days ago, when two Palestinian boys, they fixed, I think they were plumbers. So they fixed something in an old lady's home, an old Jewish lady, and they did it for free. Because she was from the Holocaust survivor. She was a Holocaust survivor. And Holocaust, it's a very important point to mention this. Really, we have to let's stop being emotional. The Holocaust was a disaster, was a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. What happened in the Holocaust was a terrible thing. And that's something that we as Muslims cannot support. So it is wrong to say, yeah, well, it was good what happened to them. That was that time. That was long before the State of Israel was established. So if there is a problem with the State of Israel politically nowadays, then it's a problem with Zionism and not a problem with the Jews. Otherwise, we would have a problem with what Allah says in the Quran, that these are people of the book, right? They are people of the book, the Jews and the Christians alike. Yes, ma'am. In Britain, yes, Jazakallah khair. Abdullah Quilliam, who was that? Have you ever heard of him? Abdullah Quilliam? Yes, I'm coming to you. Just a minute. And nobody has ever heard of Abdullah Quilliam William? No. I'm not talking about the first Abdullah Quilliam. I'm talking about the person Abdullah Quilliam William. He was the first British Muslim, white Muslim from Liverpool, who went on a holiday to North Africa, on holidays to North Africa, got to know the Muslims and Islam, and came back and actually through his hands more than 600 people accepted Islam. And that was in Liverpool. And please go and see the house, which is now re-established, made a masjid again. He had a massive mansion. In there was a printing press, there was a school, there was a madrasa. He would educate people about Islam. And that was in Victorian Britain, guys. Victorian Britain, the 19th century. So Islam did not come with your parents and grandparents here. They came long, long before with white people. It was British. It was a very British person who accepted Islam and brought it over. Okay? Just rough. Yes, sir. I think from the women again. Okay, very quick, very quick. One of the main problems of Al-Andalus is simply the time. In history, you will learn that there's anybody on this planet, any people on this planet once had an empire. Anybody. Do you know in Myanmar, our brothers, the Burmese, the refugees, they once had in Southeast Asia, they had once an empire. These people are now refugees who were killed, massacred. They once had an empire. Everybody on this planet once was given an empire. Allah has given everybody once a peak period. Everyone. And everyone who was once up there fell. And everyone who's now up there will fall. That's guaranteed, inshallah. So everybody, if there's something we learn from Islamic history, then this is another point we learn from Islamic history. That empires rise and fall. So people now who are up there will fall once. That's for sure, inshallah. That's 100%. We don't know when. But we have to be aware of that this has happened in the past, and this is a lesson from the past. So one point is history. After 700 years, it was absolutely logical and normal that once this empire will break down, it couldn't last for long after that. No empire has lasted longer than 1,000 years. The Roman Empire, for example. No empire. Second, amongst Muslims started being too complacent and being too satisfied with what they have. Luxury goods. If you go nowadays to Spain, to the south of Spain, you go to Cordoba, to Granada, to Sevilla, to Malaga, you go and see what the Muslims have left behind. If you see the palaces, if you go and see the Alhambra in Granada, if you go and see what they've left behind, subhanallah, unbelievable. Unbelievable what they've left behind. Imagine how it looked that time. If you see nowadays, you will say, subhanallah, how was this? Imagine how Spain looked once under the Muslim rule. Imagine. So beautification of the masjid, and there's a hadith about that, right? Beautification of the masjid, of not going to the masjid because of the masjid of salah, but you're going or you're beautifying the masjid. This is something that is part of, the end of your empire, basically. So having it too easy and having a luxurious life did not help the Muslims to stay up there. Okay, it's what I mentioned before. When we have it too easy as Muslims, and I mentioned the example of Germany, France, when we have it too easy, like in this country, then you have more divisions. But when you are restricted from your environment and you have to stick together, then you stick more easily together. Okay, and you can see that in France. The Muslims in France are different to the Muslims here. Okay, so that is the two main reasons. Is it hopefully answered, inshallah. Yes, excellent. No, the workshops, I mean, there are physical workshops we're going to have, inshallah. We have them here actually in London. Tomorrow there's one in London. But inshallah, we are planning to have some workshops here. Hopefully in this masjid. Hopefully, inshallah, in Birmingham very soon, inshallah. Where you can come and go deeper into each one of these routes that we discussed. Go deeper into it, have a day workshop, for example. One thing. Second, the online academy is a certified course where you can go over a certain period of time and you do assignments or you do even exams where you can get certified from our institute, inshallah. So these are two different things, actually. But Jazakallah khair, good question. Yeah, I think it's 5 to 8. Last 5 minutes to make wudu. Right? 8 o'clock is. Whoever wants to can still after Salah come to me, inshallah. I mean, there's no issue at all. We can still discuss. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Let me take it.